As Vermont's early winter bears down with unprecedented force, Marcus Wheeler makes a choice that will echo through generations. In his worn pickup truck, loaded with salvage parts he can barely afford to spare, the struggling single dad answers a desperate call about a broken heater. The old farmhouse he pulls up to is drafty, dark, and holds a secret he couldn't possibly imagine. Despite his own mounting bills and his daughter's college dreams slipping away, Marcus works through the night, refusing payment from the quiet woman who lives alone. He leaves her with warmth and a simple wish for her safety. What he doesn't know is that in just a few weeks, the whir of helicopter blades will announce her return and reveal a truth that will transform his family forever. Could this random act of kindness be the miracle his family has been waiting for? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus Wheeler's ancient alarm clock rattled to life at 4:30 a.m., its familiar buzz echoing through the drafty two-bedroom rental he shared with his daughter. He silenced it quickly, not wanting to wake Emma, though he knew she was probably already up working on college applications. The morning ritual began as it always did. Coffee first, strong enough to cut through the bone-deep exhaustion that came from raising a teenager alone while running a one-man HVAC business. The kitchen's yellow fluorescent light flickered as he moved around, his sock-clad feet careful to avoid the creaky floorboards. Their home wasn't much, but he'd managed to keep it warm and safe for the past decade, since Sarah passed. The thought of his late wife brought a familiar ache, but also a smile. She'd be so proud of Emma. "Dad?" Emma's voice carried from the hallway. "You're up early again." She stood in the doorway, already dressed for school, her laptop balanced on one arm and a stack of papers in the other. At 17, she was the spitting image of her mother. Same determined brown eyes, same practical approach to life. The only difference was that where Sarah had been a dreamer, Emma was a planner. "College essays won't write themselves," she said, settling at their small kitchen table. "And Mr. Peterson said my personal statement still needs work if I want." A shot at the engineering program. Marcus poured a second cup of coffee, adding the splash of cream and sugar the way Emma liked it. "You're already top of your class, kiddo. Any college would be lucky to have you." "Lucky doesn't pay tuition, Dad." Her voice carried the weight of conversations they'd had too many times before. "I've been researching scholarships, but even with perfect grades." She trailed off, both of them aware of the mountain of medical bills that had eaten through Sarah's life insurance and their savings. Marcus set the coffee beside her laptop, noticing how the screen displayed yet another scholarship application. His throat tightened. "We'll figure it out, Em. We always do." The morning light was just beginning to creep through their frost-covered windows as Emma worked and Marcus prepared for another day of service calls. His tool belt, the same one he'd had since trade school, hung by the door, its leather worn smooth from years of use. Each morning he checked his supplies, gauge set, multimeter, recovery machine, and the dwindling stock of replacement parts he could barely afford to maintain. "Got another busy day?" Emma asked, not looking up from her essay. 6 calls scheduled, probably more once people wake up and find their heat's not working." He pulled on his heavy work boots, the steel toes scratched from countless crawl spaces and mechanical rooms. "First one's across town. Mrs. Rodriguez's furnace is acting up again. Tell her I said hi. And Dad." Emma finally looked up, her expression serious. "Don't forget to eat lunch today. I packed you a sandwich." Marcus nodded, his heart swelling with pride and a touch of guilt. She shouldn't have to worry about him, shouldn't have to be so grown up so soon. But life had other plans for them, and they'd learned to face it together. As he headed out to his truck, the pre-dawn air bit through his jacket. Vermont winters showed no mercy, and this one was starting earlier than usual. The weather report predicted record lows by the weekend, which meant his phone would be ringing non-stop. Good for business, but hard on his inventory of parts, most of which he'd have to pay for up front before insurance companies or customers settled their bills. The truck's engine turned over reluctantly, protesting the cold. On the passenger seat lay Emma's college applications, Harvard, MIT, Vermont Tech, and a handful of others. Each one represented both a dream and a reminder of how far short he was falling of providing for his daughter's future. But giving up wasn't in the Wheeler family DNA. Sarah had made him promise to make sure Emma had every opportunity, and he intended to keep that promise, even if he had to work every hour God sent to do it. As he pulled out of the driveway, he caught a glimpse of Emma through the kitchen window, bent over her laptop, determination written in every line of her posture. "We'll figure it out," he whispered again, this time to himself, as the rising sun painted the frost-covered streets in shades of gold and promise. Mrs. Rodriguez's furnace problem turned out to be worse than expected. Marcus knelt in her basement, flashlight balanced between his teeth, studying the cracked heat exchanger with a mixture of concern and resignation. This wasn't a simple fix. The entire unit needed replacement, and he knew his elderly client lived on a fixed income. "How bad is it, Mr. Wheeler?" she called down the stairs, her accent thick with worry. He removed the flashlight, choosing his words carefully. "The good news is, I can get it running today. The bad news is it's not a permanent solution." He explained the situation in simple terms, watching relief and anxiety battle across her weathered face. "I can make payments," she offered, ringing, her hands in her apron. Marcus thought of the stack of unpaid bills in his truck, of Emma's college applications, of the parts supplier who was getting increasingly impatient about his outstanding balance. Then he thought of Mrs. Rodriguez's late husband, who'd always slipped him extra tamales at Christmas, even when they couldn't afford his full rate. "We'll work something out," he said, already calculating which corners he could cut in his own. "Budget. Let me make some calls about getting you a reconditioned unit at cost." The gratitude in her eyes reminded him so much of Sarah, it hurt. His wife had always said kindness was the investment that paid dividends in ways you couldn't measure. Even now, 7 years after losing her to cancer, her wisdom guided his decisions. Back in his truck, Marcus reviewed his schedule while eating the sandwich Emma had packed. Turkey and Swiss, Sarah's favorite. The thought brought a fresh wave of memories. Hospital corridors that seemed to stretch forever, the steady beep of monitors and mounting bills that arrived with ruthless regularity. They'd had good insurance, but cancer didn't care about coverage limits or out-of-pocket maximums. His phone buzzed. Another emergency call. Mr. Peterson, Emma's guidance counselor, needed his office heating checked before a college recruiter visited tomorrow. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. He'd be fixing the heating in the very office where Emma would discuss her academic future, all while wondering how to afford that future. The afternoon blurred into a series of service calls. A clogged condensate, line at the local diner, a faulty thermostat at the pharmacy, a blower motor on its last legs at the elementary school. At each stop, people greeted him warmly. He'd kept their homes and businesses comfortable through countless Vermont winters. But warmth and respect didn't pay the bills. Between calls, he checked his voicemail. The parts supplier had left another message about his account. "Marcus, we value your business, but we need to discuss payment terms." His stomach clenched. Without parts, he couldn't work. Without work, he couldn't pay for parts. The cycle was becoming suffocating. At the elementary school, he passed the wall of student artwork. A crayon drawing caught his eye, a child's representation of their hero. He recognized Emma's old art style immediately, though the picture had been hanging there for years. She'd drawn him in his work uniform, tool belt prominent, a cape flowing behind him. "My dad fixes everything," the caption read in careful third-grade handwriting. If only that was still true. These days, it felt like everything he tried to fix just revealed 2 more problems underneath. Sarah would have known how to handle it all. She'd been the organized one, the planner, the one who could stretch $1 until it screamed. Now, he was fumbling through, trying to be both mother and father, provider and nurturer, while watching their dreams for Emma slip further out of reach. The school secretary caught him staring at the drawing. "We've kept it up all these years because it reminds everyone what real heroes look like," she said softly. "Emma was so proud of you." "Still is," he replied, his voice rough. "Though these days I think she's the one taking care of me." "That's what family does," the secretary smiled. "Sarah would be proud of you both." Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He finished the repair and headed to his next call, the drawing's message echoing in his mind. Heroes fix things, but sometimes the biggest fixes needed were the ones you couldn't reach with any tool in your belt. The weather alert lit up Marcus's phone as he finished his last scheduled call of the day. "Unprecedented early winter storm system approaching. Emergency alert for Burlington area." The message detailed record-breaking low temperatures expected within the next 48 hours, with accumulating snow and dangerous wind chills to follow. His phone immediately began buzzing with incoming calls, people who'd been putting off heater maintenance, hoping to squeeze one more season out of aging systems. Marcus pulled over to the side of the road, watching the sunset paint the sky in ominous shades of grey and purple. The forecast on his weather app showed temperatures dropping into the single digits by tomorrow night. At home, Emma was already in crisis management mode. She'd spread their bills across the kitchen table, calculator in hand, a familiar crease of worry between her eyebrows. "The forecast is all over social media," she said without looking up. "You're going to be swamped already." Marcus shed his jacket, noting how their own heating system labored against the falling temperature. "Got 23 voicemails just on my drive home. I made a list of your regular customers who might need preventive maintenance." Emma pushed a carefully organized spreadsheet toward him. Prioritized by age and health conditions. Mrs. Rodriguez's neighbors checked on her. She says the temporary fix is holding. Marcus studied the list, heart swelling with pride and aching with guilt. His 17-year-old shouldn't be managing his business operations, but here she was, stepping up as she always did. "Dad." Emma's voice had that careful tone she used when approaching difficult subjects. "I found this while I was organizing." She slid an envelope across the table, another letter from the parts supplier. "They're threatening to cut off our credit." Marcus sank into a kitchen chair, the weight of the day settling onto his shoulders. "I'll figure something out. Maybe get an advance from some of the bigger commercial clients. Or I could defer college for a year," Emma suggested quietly. "Work full-time, help build up the business?" "No." The word came out sharper than he intended. "That's not happening, Em. Your mother and I always said education comes first." "Mom also said family comes first," Emma countered, her chin set. In that stubborn angle she'd inherited from Sarah, "and right now you need help." Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed again. The local news had picked up the weather story. Historic Arctic blast to hit Vermont. Emergency services preparing for crisis. The accompanying video showed salt trucks already treating roads. Emergency shelters being set up. Emma peered over his shoulder at the forecast models. "This is going to be bad, isn't it?" "Yeah, kiddo, it is." Marcus scrolled through his contacts, mentally calculating how many emergency calls he could handle. His parts inventory was already depleted, and with his credit on hold, he couldn't stock up for the coming crisis. A text message from the school district popped up. They were already announcing a 2-day closure in anticipation of the storm. Another message followed from Mr. Peterson. "Emma's interview with the MIT recruiter has been rescheduled for next week due to weather. She's still at the top of our recommendation list." The reminder of Emma's college prospects twisted something in Marcus's gut. Each acceptance letter would come with a price tag he couldn't meet. Each scholarship application was a roll of dice against impossible odds. "I'll start returning calls," Emma said, reaching for his work phone. "At least I can help schedule." The lights flickered, and their own heating system gave a threatening wheeze before settling back into its labored rhythm. "Dad?" Emma's voice held a note of worry he hadn't heard since Sarah's final hospital stay. "Maybe we should check our system before you handle everyone else's." Marcus stood, already reaching for his toolbox. Their unit was old, but he'd nursed it along for years. "One more season," he silently pleaded as he descended to the basement. "Just hold together for one more season." But even as he began his inspection, he knew they were running on borrowed time. Like everything else in his world, it was held together with spare parts and stubborn determination. The storm front visible through the basement window seemed to mock his efforts, its dark clouds promising to test every patch and temporary fix he'd ever made. His phone buzzed again. Another desperate call for help. Another family facing in cold night. Another bill he'd probably have to write off as a loss. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him like the approaching storm front, each obligation adding to the pressure. "Just hold together," he whispered again, this time to himself as much as the heating unit. Outside, the wind began to pick up, carrying the first few snowflakes of what promised to be a very long winter. The call came at 11:42 p.m., just as Marcus was finally closing his eyes after a 16-hour workday. The number wasn't in his contacts, but with temperatures already dipping below freezing, he couldn't ignore it. "Wheeler HVAC, he answered, voice gravelly, with exhaustion. "I'm so sorry to call this late." The woman's voice was elderly but clear, carrying an unfamiliar refinement that stood out from his usual clients. "I'm out on Old Mill Road, and my heating system has completely failed. I know it's terrible timing, but I'm worried about my pipes freezing." Marcus sat up, already reaching for his work clothes. Old Mill Road meant the historic district, where sprawling farmhouses stood as remnants of Burlington's agricultural past. "Do you have any temporary heat source, space heaters?" "I'm afraid not," she replied. "I'm rather new to the area, and I wasn't quite prepared for Vermont weather." A pause. "I understand if it's too late to come out." Through his bedroom window, Marcus could see fresh snow beginning to fall. The Weather Service's historic Arctic blast was arriving right on schedule. He thought of his dwindling parts supply, of the stack of unpaid bills, of Emma's college applications waiting for financial aid forms he couldn't complete, honestly. "Dad?" Emma stood in his doorway, wrapped in her mother's old quilted robe. "Another call?" He covered the phone. "Old Mill Road, elderly woman, no heat." Emma's expression softened, so much like Sarah's it made his chest ache. "Go, I'll make you some coffee for the road." Back to the phone. "I can be there in 20 minutes. Can you text me the exact address?" "Oh, thank you." The woman's relief was palpable. "It's the Morrison farmhouse. The white one with green shutters past the old maple grove. I'll leave the porch light on." Marcus knew the place. Everyone in Burlington did. The Morrison farmhouse was a local landmark, vacant more often than not over the past decade. He'd driven past it hundreds of times, admiring its elegant lines, even as he noted its advancing decay. While Emma made coffee, Marcus loaded his truck with every part he might need, knowing the house's age would make diagnosis tricky. The snow was falling faster now, thick flakes catching in the beam of his flashlight, as he did one final check of his supplies. Emma appeared with a thermos and a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. "Call me when you get there. The roads are getting bad." "You should be asleep," he said, accepting both items. "Don't you have that calculus test tomorrow?" "Already studied, and I'd rather know you made it safely." She hugged him quick and fierce. "Be careful, Dad." The drive to Old Mill Road took longer than expected. The snowplows hadn't made it out this far yet, and Marcus's truck fought for traction on the unplowed lanes. The Morrison farmhouse emerged from the swirling snow like a ghost, stately even in its neglect, its windows dark, except for a single porch light that cast long shadows across the fresh snow. As he pulled into the circular drive, his headlights swept across an unfamiliar car, a modest older sedan that seemed at odds with the grand house behind it. The porch steps creaked under his weight, protesting years of Vermont winters. His knock was answered almost immediately by a woman who appeared to be in her 70s, wrapped in what looked like several layers of sweaters. Despite the cold and late hour, she carried herself with remarkable poise. "Mr. Wheeler, I'm Catherine. Thank you so much for coming out in this weather." She stepped back, gesturing him inside. "I feel terrible dragging you out so late, but I didn't know who else to call." The foyer, lit by a single lamp, hinted at the house's former glory. Elaborate woodwork, high ceilings, and the kind of craftsmanship that had died out half a century ago. But the air was bitter cold, and Marcus could hear pipes groaning ominously. In the walls. "Let's take a look at your system," he said, already unzipping his tool bag. "Don't worry about the hour. Nobody should be without heat on a night like this." Catherine's grateful smile reminded him of his mother, and any lingering regrets about taking the late call vanished. Some things were more important than sleep, or even good business sense. Sarah had taught him that, and it was a lesson he'd never forgotten. The Morrison farmhouse's basement was like stepping into a museum of heating technology. Marcus's flashlight beam revealed a massive old furnace system, probably original to the house, that had been modified and updated piecemeal over decades. Copper pipes snake-webbed across the ceiling, disappearing into the walls through holes drilled in ancient beams. "The previous owners left some documentation," Catherine said, holding up a leather folder that looked as old as the house itself. "Though I'm afraid it's not very well organized." Marcus accepted the folder, noting how the leather had worn smooth at the edges from years of handling. Inside, he found a chronological record of every repair and modification since 1947. The latest entry was from 3 years ago. "System failing. Replacement recommended. ST cost $27,000. "They never did the replacement," Catherine said quietly, watching his face. "I suppose that's why the price was so reasonable when I bought it." Marcus nodded, already tracing pipe paths with his flashlight. The system was a hybrid monster, part gravity hot water, part forced air, with modifications layered on modifications. Getting it running tonight would take every trick he knew. "Mind if I ask how long you've been in Vermont?" he asked, pulling out his diagnostic tools. "Just moved in last week," Catherine replied, wrapping her sweaters tighter. "I wanted somewhere quiet to retire. The real estate agent mentioned the heating might need attention, but—" She gestured at the falling snow visible through the basement window. "I wasn't expecting winter quite so soon." There was something in her tone, a hint of deeper story, that reminded Marcus of Sarah in her final days, the same quiet dignity masking uncertainty. He pushed the thought away, focusing on the task at hand. The diagnostic check revealed multiple issues: a failing circulator pump, a cracked condensate line, and air locked in several zones. Any one of these could kill the heat. Combined, they were a perfect storm of problems. "I can get it running tonight," he said, laying out his tools. "But I should be honest. This is a temporary fix at best. The whole system needs to be replaced." "Yes," Catherine smiled slightly. "But perhaps we could focus on getting through this storm first." Marcus found himself smiling back. There was something disarming about her practical approach, so different from the panic most clients showed when facing major repairs. He called Emma while gathering supplies from his truck, letting her know he'd arrived safely. "It's pretty bad, kiddo. Might be here a while. Need me to read you any specs?" She was already at her computer, ready to help research the ancient system's quirks. "Not this time. Got the original documentation here, if you can believe it. Get some sleep. You've got that test tomorrow, Dad." Her voice held that familiar note of concern. "We're almost out of parts inventory. Are you sure?" "I'll figure something out," he assured her. The same words he'd been saying far too often lately. "Don't worry about it." Back in the basement, Catherine had pulled an old wooden chair into a corner, perching there like a bird. She watched him work with quiet interest, occasionally asking surprisingly technical questions about the system. "Yuki seemed to know something about heating systems," he observed, wrestling with a stubborn pipe fitting. "I've learned to educate myself about things that matter," she replied. "Though I'm afraid my knowledge is mostly theoretical." Hours slipped by as Marcus coaxed the ancient system back to life. He used parts he'd been saving for other jobs, knowing he'd have to explain to those customers why their repairs would be delayed. The storm howled outside, but inside the basement there was only the quiet focus of work and Catherine's thoughtful presence. Finally, near 3 a.m., warm air began flowing through the vents. The pipes stopped their ominous groaning, settling into a gentle hum that spoke of proper circulation restored. "There," Marcus said, packing up his tools. "It's not pretty, but it should hold until we can properly address the bigger issues." Catherine stood, her relief evident despite her composed demeanor. "Mr. Wheeler, I cannot thank you enough. What do I owe you for this midnight rescue?" Marcus hesitated, mental calculations warring with conscience. The parts alone were worth more than he should spare, but something about Catherine's dignified determination to face the Vermont winter alone touched a familiar chord. "Let's call it an even 100 for the emergency call," he said, knowing he'd never recoup the true cost. "We can discuss a proper estimate for the full replacement once this storm passes." Catherine's eyes, sharp despite the late hour, studied him with an unreadable expression. "You used far more than $100 worth of parts." "Yeah, well," Marcus shrugged, thinking of Sarah, of Emma, of all the times someone had shown them kindness when they needed it most. Sometimes getting through the storm is what matters. The rest can wait. Despite Marcus's temporary fix, the ancient heating system required constant adjustment throughout the night. Each time he thought he'd solved one issue, another zone would go cold or a pipe would start its ominous groaning. Catherine insisted on staying up with him, appearing periodically with fresh coffee that was surprisingly good for middle-of-the-night brewing. "You really don't have to stay awake," Marcus said around 4 a.m., emerging from behind the furnace with smudges of decades-old soot on his face. "I can handle this. I find I don't sleep much these days anyway," Catherine replied, passing him a steaming mug. "Besides, it's interesting watching someone who knows their craft so well." The comment sparked a memory of Sarah, who used to say she could watch him work for hours. She'd claimed it was like seeing a master artist at work. Though Marcus had always laughed off the comparison, there was nothing artistic about fixing heating systems. "Your daughter," Catherine said carefully, "she's applying to colleges." Marcus looked up sharply, not remembering mentioning Emma, but of course he'd been on the phone with her earlier. "Yeah," he nodded, adjusting a pressure valve. "She's brilliant, top of her class, wants to be an engineer, like her father, better." Marcus smiled despite his exhaustion. "She's got her mother's brains and determination, already designing things I can barely understand." Catherine was quiet for a moment, watching as he salvaged parts from his dwindling supply to replace a failing section of pipe. "It can't be easy, managing a business and raising her alone." The observation was made without pity, just a simple acknowledgement of reality that somehow made it easier to respond. "We manage. Emma helps more than she should have to, but—" He shrugged. "You do what you have to do." "Yes," Catherine said softly, "you do." The next few hours passed in a rhythm of work and quiet conversation. Catherine asked thoughtful questions about heating systems, about the local area, about Emma's college hopes. She shared little about herself, but her attention had a quality that reminded Marcus of his favorite teachers from school, genuine interest combined with careful observation. As dawn approached, the system finally settled into a stable operation. The house had warmed to a comfortable temperature, though Marcus knew it was fragile stability at best. He'd used nearly every spare part in his truck, including components he'd been saving for other repairs. "I'll need to check it again tomorrow." "Today, I mean," he said, packing his tools. "Make sure everything's holding." "Of course." Catherine walked him to the door, where the storm had left nearly a foot of fresh snow. "Mr. Wheeler, Marcus, about the payment, like I said, we can worry about that later." He held up a hand to forestall her protest. "Just keep an eye on the pressure gauge I showed you. If it drops below the red line, call immediately," she finished. "I remember." The rising sun was painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold as Marcus trudged to his truck. He was bone-tired, the kind of exhaustion that made every movement feel like moving through molasses. But the house behind him was warm, and sometimes that was enough. "Mr. Wheeler," Catherine called from the porch, "why did you really come out here tonight? With the storm, the late hour, you must have known it wouldn't be profitable." Marcus paused, one hand on his truck door. The question stirred something deep in his memory. Sarah asking him once why he did so many repairs at cost for people who couldn't afford them. "Because 20 years ago," he said finally, "when Emma was just a baby, and Sarah first got sick, our heating went out during a storm like this. We couldn't afford repairs, but this old guy, Pete Morrison, no relation to the house, just coincidence, came out at midnight and fixed it. Wouldn't take a dime." He smiled at the memory, said, "Sometimes you just pass on the kindness you've been shown." Catherine's expression shifted subtly, something like recognition flickering across her features. "Pete Morrison," she repeated softly. "I believe I've heard of him. Good man. Gone now, but—" Marcus gestured at the warming sky. "Guess some debts you can only pay forward." As he drove away, Catherine remained on the porch, a small figure wrapped in sweaters, watching until his truck disappeared around the bend. Something about her stillness, her careful attention to his story, nagged at his tired mind. But the sun was up. He had a full day of emergency calls ahead, and Emma would be worried if he didn't get home soon to check on their own heating system. Behind him, the Morrison farmhouse stood silent in the morning light, its windows glowing with warm life for the first time in years. Dawn found Marcus slumped at his kitchen table, still in his work clothes, staring at the pile of messages that had accumulated overnight. 27 emergency calls, each one urgent, each one needing parts he no longer had after the Morrison house repair. The coffee Emma had left him had gone cold, untouched beside a note in her neat handwriting. "Gone to school early, study group, left you breakfast in the microwave. Love you." His phone buzzed again, his parts supplier. Marcus let it go. To voicemail, already knowing the message's content. Without credit and without inventory, he'd have to start turning people away. In Vermont's brutal winter, that felt like a betrayal of everything he stood for. The microwave hummed as he reheated. Emma's breakfast, eggs and toast, simple but thoughtful. Like her mother, she showed love through small acts of care. A fresh wave of guilt hit him as he spotted her MIT application on the counter, the financial aid section still incomplete. A soft thud from the mail slot interrupted his thoughts. Among the usual bills was a cream-colored envelope, expensive, stationery bearing the Morrison farmhouse's address. Inside, he found a handwritten note in elegant script. "Dear Mr. Wheeler, your kindness last night went far beyond professional obligation. The check enclosed is a small token of my gratitude. Please use it as you see fit. With sincere thanks, Catherine Morgan." The check made him blink twice, certain his exhausted mind was playing tricks. The amount was exactly what he needed to restock his inventory, down to the dollar. How had she known? Before he could ponder. This further, his phone rang again. This time it was Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter, panic in her voice. "Mr. Wheeler, the fix from yesterday. Something's wrong. The house is freezing and Mum's not feeling well." Marcus grabbed his keys, the mystery of Catherine's check temporarily forgotten. In the truck, he did a mental inventory of what little he had left. Not enough. Not nearly enough. The radio crackled with emergency weather updates as he drove. The Arctic front was settling in for the long haul, with another storm system approaching. His own heating system groaned in protest as he pulled away, a sound he was trying hard to ignore. At Mrs. Rodriguez's house, he found what he'd feared. The temporary repair had failed, and he didn't have the parts to fix it properly. The old woman sat bundled in blankets, her breathing labored in the cold air. "I'll figure something out," he promised, the words feeling hollow with repetition. "Maybe I can pull some parts from my home unit." "No, mijijo." Mrs. Rodriguez shook, her head firmly. "You have Emma to think about." His phone buzzed again. A text from Emma. MIT interviewer confirmed for tomorrow. Can't wait. Love you. Marcus stepped outside, ostensibly to check something in his truck, actually to hide the tears threatening to spill. The morning sun gleamed off the fresh snow, deceptively beautiful against the bitter cold. In his pocket, Catherine's check felt like it was burning a hole, offering a solution he wasn't sure he had the right to take. Back inside, he found Mrs. Rodriguez had dozed off, still wrapped in blankets. Her daughter watched him with knowing eyes. "There's no fix this time, is there?" "There's always a fix," Marcus said automatically, his mind racing. "Just got to figure out the right one." He thought of Catherine in her big, empty farmhouse, of her careful questions about Emma, of the oddly precise amount of her check. Something tugged at his memory. A story Sarah used to tell about angels appearing as travelers in need, testing the kindness of strangers. His phone buzzed one final time. A weather alert showing the approaching storm system, massive and unforgiving. In that moment, Marcus realized he was standing at a crossroads. The check in his pocket represented more than just parts inventory. It was a test of sorts. But of what? He wasn't quite sure. Mrs. Rodriguez coughed in her sleep, and Marcus made his decision. Sometimes the right thing and the practical thing were the same thing. Sarah would have understood that. He pulled out his phone and dialed the parts supplier. "Hey, Jim, about that inventory order. I can pay in full today." 2 weeks passed in a blur of emergency calls and dwindling daylight. Catherine's check had allowed Marcus to restock his inventory and keep up with the brutal winter's demands, though he still hadn't found time to return to the Morrison farmhouse for a follow-up check. His calls had gone to voicemail, and he tried not to worry about the ancient heating system he'd cobbled together that night. The morning everything changed started normally enough. Marcus was replacing a heat exchanger at the local coffee shop when the first helicopter passed overhead, low enough to rattle the windows. Then another and another. "Some kind of emergency?" he asked the barista, who was glued to her phone. "You haven't seen the news?" She turned her screen toward him. "Catherine Morgan is in town. The Catherine Morgan. Real estate mogul, they say. She owns half the commercial property in Vermont." Marcus's wrench slipped, clattering against the pipes. "What did you say?" "It's all over social media. 3 helicopters just landed at the Morrison property. Apparently she bought it weeks ago, living there in secret while planning some massive development project for the area. The pieces started falling into place. Catherine's technical knowledge of buildings, her careful questions about the local community, the precisely calculated check." Marcus's hands felt numb as he packed up his tools, memories of that night shifting into new context. He emerged from the coffee shop into a transformed scene. News vans lined the street, reporters doing live stand-ups with the Morrison farmhouse visible on the hill behind them. The helicopters gleamed in the winter sun, their sleek corporate logos catching the light. His phone buzzed. "Emma." "Dad, are you watching the news? The woman whose house you fixed, she's like a billionaire. She's been all over the morning. Shows, talking about some huge investment in Burlington's historic district." Marcus leaned against his truck, trying to process it all. "Emma, Mr. Wheeler." A voice cut through the chaos, familiar yet different. Catherine stood there no longer in layers of sweaters, but in an elegant business suit. 2 men in dark suits flanked her, while photographers captured the scene from a respectful distance. "I believe we need to finish our discussion about that heating system," she said, her eyes twinkling with the same quiet intelligence he remembered from that long night. Before Marcus could respond, more vehicles arrived. Sleek, black SUVs with tinted windows. A man in an expensive suit emerged, waving blueprints. "Ms. Morgan, the development team is ready for the presentation." "They can wait," Catherine said firmly. "I have some unfinished business with Mr. Wheeler." She turned back to Marcus. "Would you join me for a cup of coffee? There's something I'd like to discuss." The coffee shop had been cleared of other customers, though the wide-eyed barista remained, trying to appear busy, while obviously straining to hear every word. Catherine led Marcus to a corner table, dismissing her entourage with a gentle wave. "I suppose I owe you an explanation," she began, stirring her coffee with the same careful precision he remembered from that night. "The check," Marcus said. "You knew exactly what I needed. I make it my business to know things, Mr. Wheeler. It's how I've built my company. Before I buy any property, I research the community thoroughly. I know about your reputation for helping people regardless of their ability to pay. I know about Emma's college applications. I know about Sarah." Marcus's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. Why the act? Why pretend to be a helpless old woman with a broken heater? Catherine smiled. "Because character is who you are when you think no one is watching. I needed to understand this community, not just its real estate values. And you, Mr. Wheeler, showed me exactly what I needed to see." Through the window, Marcus could see more news vans arriving, more suits with blueprints and presentations. "So, the development project will proceed," Catherine nodded. "But not quite as my board of directors expects. You see, I'm not just interested in building luxury condos or shopping centers. I'm interested in building communities, and sometimes that starts with making sure everyone has a warm place to sleep at night." She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a thick envelope. "I have a proposition for you, Mr. Wheeler. One that could solve quite a few problems, yours, mine, and this community's. That is, if you're willing to think bigger than emergency repairs." Outside, the winter sun caught the helicopter's blades, sending patterns of light dancing across the snow-covered street. Marcus thought of Sarah, of Emma's college dreams, of Mrs. Rodriguez's failing heater, of all the people in Burlington just trying to stay warm through another Vermont winter. "I'm listening," he said. Catherine's proposition was both simpler and more overwhelming than Marcus had expected. She spread several documents across the coffee shop table, each one representing a piece of a larger vision. "Burlington has a problem," she began, her voice carrying the same quiet authority she'd shown that night in the farmhouse. "Every winter, dozens of families struggle with inadequate heating. Every summer, aging cooling systems fail during heat waves. The wealthy get their systems replaced. Everyone else patches and prays." Marcus nodded, thinking of Mrs. Rodriguez and countless others like her. "What I'm proposing," Catherine continued, "is a complete overhaul of the community's residential heating infrastructure, starting with a new facility to manufacture energy-efficient units locally and a training program to create skilled technicians." She paused, watching his face. "Under the direction of someone who understands both the technical and human aspects of keeping a community warm." Marcus stared at the blueprints before him. A state-of-the-art manufacturing plant, a technical training center, and most surprisingly, a foundation dedicated to providing heating assistance to low-income families. "You want me to run all this?" His voice sounded distant to his own ears. "I want to partner with you," Catherine corrected. "Your expertise, your reputation, your understanding of this community, combined with my resources and business experience." She smiled. "Consider it an investment in human infrastructure." Through the window, Marcus could see his battered work truck parked between gleaming corporate vehicles. The contrast felt like a perfect metaphor for this moment. His small, practical world suddenly intersecting with something much larger. "The starting salary," Catherine said quietly, sliding another document forward, "should cover Emma's college education. Any college she chooses." The number on the page made Marcus's coffee cup tremble slightly as he set it down. It was more money than he'd ever imagined earning, more than enough to secure Emma's future, and then some. "Why me?" he asked finally. "There are bigger companies, more qualified." 3 weeks ago, Catherine interrupted gently, a man drove out in a snowstorm at midnight to help a stranger. He used parts he couldn't spare, charged far less than he should have, and showed more concern for his elderly client's comfort than his own profit margin. She leaned forward. "That's who I want running this initiative. Someone who understands that keeping people warm isn't just about maintaining equipment. It's about maintaining community. Marcus thought of Sarah again, wondering what she would make of all this. She'd always said his biggest problem was thinking too small, being too content with just getting by. "There's one condition," Catherine added, her expression serious. "The Rodriguez family gets the first new heating system installed personally by you." The mention of Mrs. Rodriguez brought Marcus back to reality. "I'd need time," he said slowly, "to train someone to handle my existing clients, to make sure no one gets left in the cold during the transition." "Of course," Catherine nodded approvingly. "I'd expect nothing less. We'll provide whatever resources you need to ensure a smooth handover." A text buzzed on Marcus's phone. Emma again. "Dad, everyone at school is talking about the Morrison house. Is it true you fixed her heating? Call me." Catherine watched him read the message, her eyes gentle. "You should go tell her in person. This affects her future as much as yours." Marcus stood, feeling slightly unsteady. The documents on the table represented everything he'd ever wanted to provide for Emma, everything Sarah had dreamed of for their daughter. But they also represented a step into an unknown world, far beyond the familiar territory of emergency repairs and midnight service calls. "Take the papers home," Catherine said, gathering them into a folder. "Discuss it with Emma. Sleep on it." She smiled. "The heating system at the Morrison house isn't the only thing that needs careful consideration before making major changes." As Marcus turned to leave, Catherine added, "Oh, and Mr. Wheeler, thank you again for that night. Not just for fixing the heat, for reminding me why I started this business in the first place. Sometimes we all need a reminder of what really matters." Outside, the winter sun had broken through the clouds, making the snow glitter like possibilities. Marcus sat in his truck, the folder heavy in his hands, thinking of Sarah's favorite saying, "Sometimes the biggest repairs start with the smallest acts of kindness." Marcus found Emma waiting on their front porch, practically vibrating with excitement despite the cold. She'd left school early, something she'd never done before, after seeing the news about Catherine Morgan's arrival spread across social media. "Is it true?" she burst out before he could even leave the truck. "Did you really fix a billionaire's heating system? Everyone's saying she's going to transform the whole town, and—" She stopped, noticing his expression. "Dad, what's wrong?" Inside, Marcus spread Catherine's documents across their small kitchen table. The same table where, just weeks ago, they'd been calculating how many extra repairs he'd need to handle just to keep up with the bills. Emma read through them slowly, her expression changing from excitement to disbelief to something deeper, more complex. "This is—" She paused, touching the salary figure with a trembling finger. "Dad, this would cover MIT, with money left over." Marcus watched his daughter's face, seeing Sarah's analytical mind at work behind those familiar brown eyes. "It's not just about the money, Em. It's about changing everything we've built here. Everything we know." Emma pulled out an old photo album from the shelf, the one Sarah had meticulously maintained until her final days. She opened to a particular page. Marcus, at her age, fresh out of trade school, proudly standing in front of his first work truck. "Mum wrote something here," Emma said softly, pointing to Sarah's elegant handwriting beneath the photo. "Sometimes the biggest dreams start with the smallest tools." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He remembered that day clearly, Sarah taking the picture, laughing at his serious expression, telling him he was thinking too small, that one day he'd do more than just emergency repairs. "She always said you were meant for bigger things," Emma continued, turning pages. "Remember how she used to talk about your community vision? How you didn't just fix heaters, you fixed people's sense of security?" The photos told their story. Marcus working late nights, Emma as a toddler sleeping in his tool shop, Sarah's proud smile as she watched them both. The last photos taken in the hospital showed Sarah still planning, still pushing them to think beyond tomorrow. "But what about our clients?" Marcus asked, voicing his deepest concern. "Mrs. Rodriguez, the school, all the people counting on us?" Emma picked up Catherine's proposal again, reading more carefully now. "Dad, that's exactly what this is about. It's not about abandoning them. It's about helping more people, teaching others to do what you do, making sure everyone can afford proper heating." She looked up, her eyes shining. "It's everything Mom used to talk about." Marcus stood, walking to the window where he could see his truck parked outside, the tools in. That truck had built their life, kept their family going through the hardest times. But Sarah had always insisted tools were meant to build futures, not just maintain the present. "What do you think she would say?" he asked quietly. Emma was quiet for a moment, still looking at the old photos. "Remember what she told you before she left. Don't let fear of changing keep you from growing." Marcus turned back to find Emma holding out one final photo he hadn't seen in years. It showed all three of them at Emma's first science fair. Her project had been about home heating efficiency. Sarah was beaming, pointing to Emma's hand-drawn diagrams about community energy solutions. "Mom would say this isn't just an opportunity for us," Emma said softly. "It's an opportunity to make her dreams for both of us come true." Outside, the evening light caught the frost on the windows, creating patterns that reminded Marcus of Sarah's favorite saying about how beauty could be found even in the coldest moments. He picked up Catherine's folder again, seeing it now through different eyes, not just as a business proposition, but as a chance to build the kind of legacy Sarah had always believed he could create. "So," Emma said, her voice carrying that perfect mix of Sarah's wisdom and her own youthful hope, "are we doing this?" Marcus looked at his daughter, no longer the little girl who used to sleep in his workshop, but a young woman ready to chase her own dreams, and made his decision. The transformation began with Mrs. Rodriguez's house, just as Catherine had stipulated. On a crisp morning 2 weeks after Marcus accepted the position, his old truck pulled up alongside a fleet of new service vehicles, each bearing the freshly designed logo, Wheeler Community Heating Solutions. "Mi hijo," Mrs. Rodriguez exclaimed when she saw not just Marcus, but an entire team of technicians unloading state-of-the-art equipment. "What is all this?" Marcus guided her through the installation plan, explaining how her home would serve as the pilot project for the community initiative. Her eyes grew wide at the mention of solar backup systems and smart temperature controls. But it was the monthly utility savings that brought tears to her eyes. "Sarah would be so proud," she whispered, patting his cheek like she had done since he was a rookie technician learning his trade. "She always said you were meant for more than just repairs." The installation team worked with precision, but Marcus insisted on handling key components himself. Catherine had suggested filming the process for training purposes and a documentary. Crew captured his methodical approach, his careful explanations to the new technicians. The way he treated Mrs. Rodriguez's home with the same respect he'd show a luxury mansion. Emma stopped by after school, still wearing her MIT acceptance pin. The letter had arrived the day after Marcus signed the contract. She watched from the sidewalk as her father demonstrated proper installation techniques to a group of apprentices, his voice carrying the authority of decades of experience. "He's a natural teacher," Catherine observed, appearing beside Emma with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Emma, who accepted it with a smile. These impromptu coffee deliveries had become their ritual over the past 2 weeks of planning meetings. "Mom used to say that too," Emma replied. "She said his real gift wasn't fixing things, but helping others learn to fix things themselves." Inside, Marcus was showing a young apprentice how to optimize the new system's efficiency settings. The apprentice, a former student from the local technical college, was one of 20 selected for the program's first training cohort. Each one would receive full certification, guaranteed employment, and profit sharing in the new enterprise. "Your father insisted on the profit sharing," Catherine told Emma. "Said if we're really building community, everyone should have a stake in its success." The afternoon light slanted through Mrs. Rodriguez's windows, catching the chrome of the new heating unit. Marcus stepped back, watching the temperature reading stabilize, feeling the warm air begin to circulate properly for the first time in years. The apprentices gathered around the monitoring tablet, their excited murmurs bringing a smile to his face. "Now," he said, falling naturally into the teaching role, "who can tell me why we adjusted the airflow ratios before calibrating the temperature sensors?" Later, as the team packed up their tools and the documentary crew filmed final interviews with Mrs. Rodriguez's delighted family, Marcus found a quiet moment to call Sarah's old number. He'd kept paying the bill all these years, using her voicemail as a way to share important moments. The greeting was familiar, as an old friend. "Hi, you've reached Sarah Wheeler. Leave a message and remember, today's problems are tomorrow's opportunities." "Hey, love," he said softly, watching the sunset paint the new service trucks in shades of gold. "You should see what's happening. Remember all those late-night talks about building something bigger, about making sure everyone in Burlington had a warm home?" He paused, emotion thick in his throat. "Well, you were right, as usual." The sound of laughter drew his attention. Emma was showing Mrs. Rodriguez's grandchildren the tablet interface that would let them monitor their home's energy usage. The kids were fascinated, asking questions about engineering and environmental impact that made Emma's face light up with enthusiasm. Catherine appeared at his side, careful not to interrupt his private moment. "The next installation is scheduled for tomorrow. The Jensen family on Oak Street. Their daughter has asthma, so we'll need to incorporate specialized air filtration." Marcus nodded, already mentally planning the adjustments they'd need to make. Each home would present unique challenges, unique opportunities to refine their approach. But now he had resources, a team, and a vision that went beyond emergency repairs. "Oh, and Marcus?" Catherine added, a slight smile playing at her lips. "The contractor called. The new training facility plans are ready for your review. They've incorporated all your suggestions about hands-on learning spaces." As the day's light faded, Marcus watched his new team load up their trucks, saw the pride in their movements, the sense of purpose in their discussions. Mrs. Rodriguez stood in her doorway, warm air flowing freely from her new system, waving goodbye to each technician by name. This, he realized, was what Sarah had seen all along. Not just the fixing of machines, but the building of connections, the warming of homes and hearts alike. The tools might be different, but the essential work remained the same, keeping the cold at bay, one home at a time. December arrived with a fresh blanket of snow and a heap of unexpected challenges. Marcus stood in the new training facilities conference room, surrounded by blueprints and progress reports, trying to manage the growing pains of rapid expansion. His old pickup truck, now semi-retired, sat in a place of honor near the facility's entrance. Catherine's idea, a symbol of where they'd started. "We're getting some pushback from the larger HVAC companies," his operations manager reported, sliding over a folder of complaints. "They're saying we're undercutting the market with the subsidized installation program." Marcus rubbed his temples, missing the simplicity of hands-on repairs. "Remind them that we've offered to partner with any company willing to adopt our community pricing model and send them the data on how overall demand has increased since we started." The transition hadn't been entirely smooth. Some of his old clients were confused by the changes, missing the personal touch of having Marcus show up at their door. Others were skeptical of the new technology, preferring their familiar, if inefficient, systems. Emma burst into the conference room, her MIT acceptance letter now framed and hanging proudly in the lobby. "Dad, you need to see this." She pulled up a local news website on her tablet. "They're calling it the Wheeler Warming Initiative. Look at the impact statistics. From the first month." The article detailed how the program had already upgraded heating systems in 30 homes, created 15 new jobs, and reduced average heating costs by 40% in participating households. But it was the human interest sidebar that caught Marcus's eye, a photo of Mrs. Rodriguez teaching other elderly residents how to use their new smart thermostats. "Your father's created quite a movement," Catherine said from the doorway, having arrived for their weekly strategy meeting. "The governor's office called. They want to discuss expanding the program statewide." Marcus shook his head, still amazed at how quickly things were moving. "I haven't even finished training the first group of technicians. That's actually why I'm here early," Catherine smiled. "The training program has received 3 times more applications than expected for the next cohort. We need to discuss expansion plans." The meeting that followed was interrupted by a series of urgent calls: pipes bursting in the old high school, a malfunctioning heat pump at the community center, a senior living facility with failing radiators. In each case, Marcus had to resist the urge to grab his tools and handle it personally. "You've trained them well," Catherine reminded him gently. "Let them do their jobs." Later that evening, as snow fell outside his office window, Marcus found himself sorting through a box of old receipts and service records from his days as a solo operator. Each faded invoice held a memory: emergency calls on Christmas Eve, late-night repairs for families with newborns, payment plans worked out over kitchen tables with clients who had become friends. Emma found him there, still sifting through papers. "Mom's old Christmas decorations arrived from storage," she said softly. "Catherine thought we could use them for the facility's open house next week." Marcus pulled out a worn paper star, Sarah's favorite decoration. She'd hung it in his first tiny office, insisting that every business needed a touch of wonder. "Having second thoughts?" Emma asked, perching on his desk. "Not exactly," Marcus replied, turning the star in his hands. "Just remembering. Your mother always said change shouldn't mean losing what matters. So we won't," Emma said firmly. "Look." She pointed out the window where one of his newly trained technicians was doing a final check on an elderly client's car before heading home, something Marcus had always done, but had never formally trained anyone to do. "They're learning more than just heating repair from you." The facility's state-of-the-art systems hummed quietly in the background, a sharp contrast to the rattling window unit that had cooled his first office. On his desk, next to the latest budget reports and expansion proposals, sat a framed photo of his old truck in front of Mrs. Rodriguez's house, the first job that had started everything. "Catherine wants to add a scholarship program," Emma mentioned, carefully hanging the paper star in his office window, "for technical training. She suggested calling it the Sarah Wheeler Memorial Fund." Outside, the snow continued to fall, but throughout Burlington, homes stayed warm, monitored by systems Marcus had helped design, maintained by technicians he had trained, supported by a community that had grown stronger together. The paper star caught the light, casting familiar patterns on the wall, remnants of the past, illuminating the path forward. The discovery happened by accident. Emma was helping Catherine sort through old documents in the Morrison farmhouse, preparing for the property's conversion into the initiative's new community center, when she found the business card. It was decades old, yellowed with age, bearing a familiar name: Pete Morrison, Heating and Repairs. "I wondered when someone would find that," Catherine said softly, taking the card from Emma's hands. "Your father mentioned Pete that night he fixed my heating. Said he'd helped your family once, during a storm." "You knew him?" Emma asked, seeing something shift in Catherine's usually composed expression. "Pete Morrison was my father," Catherine replied, settling into an old armchair by the window. "This was my childhood home, though I haven't lived here since I was younger than you." The revelation hung in the air like frost, delicate and transformative. Catherine's eyes traced the familiar lines of the room, seeing ghosts of memories in every corner. "Dad was a lot like your father, never met a broken heater he couldn't fix, never turned away someone who needed help. But he was terrible with money, always extending credit, taking payments in garden vegetables or promised favors." She smiled, a mix of pride and old pain in her expression. "When he died, we lost everything except his good name and his collection of thank-you letters." Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, pieces falling into place. That's why you started your real estate company. I wanted to prove that you could do well by doing good. Catherine pulled out her wallet, extracting another old card. Her first business card, printed when she was just starting out. Every property I bought, every development I planned, I always asked myself, what would Dad think? Is this making the community stronger? The sound of trucks pulling up outside drew them to the window. Marcus had arrived with the renovation team, ready to begin converting the old house into a space that would serve the whole community. He was in his element, pointing out historical features that needed preservation while explaining his vision. For modern updates, I've been watching him for years, Catherine admitted, reading about his reputation for helping people, seeing how he ran his business the way Dad did, putting people before profits. When I decided to come back to Burlington, I knew I needed to meet him properly, so the broken heating that night was real enough, Catherine chuckled. This old system was as temperamental as I remembered, but I could have called any number of companies. I wanted to see if the stories about Marcus Wheeler were true. Below, Marcus was showing his team the original blueprints, explaining how they could preserve the house's character while making it more energy efficient. His passion was visible even from a distance, reminiscent of old photographs of Pete Morrison that still hung in the town library. You know, Emma said carefully, Dad's been alone since Mom died, and you seem to spend a lot of time checking on the project's progress. Catherine's laugh was warm and knowing. You're as subtle as your mother, from what I've heard. Sarah was apparently quite the matchmaker, too. You knew about Mom? I make it my business to know about the people who matter, Catherine said gently. Your mother's influence is all over this community, the school programs she started, the families. She helped when she was teaching. In many ways, she laid the groundwork for what we're doing now. They watched Marcus work for a moment longer, his enthusiasm infectious as he shared his vision with the team. The morning sun caught the silver in his hair. Earned as much from years of worry as age. He deserves to be happy, Emma said softly. Mom would want that. Happiness isn't something you can engineer, Catherine replied, but her eyes stayed on Marcus, softening at the edges. Though I suppose having a warm home is a good start. The renovation team began unloading their equipment, each truck bearing the Wheeler Community Heating Solutions logo. The project would take months, but when finished, the Morrison farmhouse would be a testament to both preservation and progress, much like the program itself. You know what Mom used to say about warm hearts and warm homes? Emma asked, watching Catherine's reflection in the window. What's that? That sometimes the best heating system is having the right people around you. Emma stood, gathering the old business cards. Dad's ordering lunch for the crew soon. Maybe you'd like to join us? Catherine smiled, recognizing Sarah's gentle wisdom, echoing through her daughter's words. Outside, Marcus looked up at the window and waved, his face lighting up in a way that had nothing to do with the winter sun. Yes, Catherine said. I think I would like that very much. The crisis struck on the coldest night of the year. Marcus had been pushing himself too hard, working long hours supervising the Morrison house renovation while managing the expanding heating initiative. The warning signs were there. Shortness of breath, persistent fatigue, pain he tried to ignore, but he was too focused on others to notice his own declining health. It was Emma who found him collapsed in his office, blueprints scattered across his desk, his face grey with exhaustion. The same office where Sarah had first shown symptoms, where they'd first learned the word terminal. But this time fate was kinder. Exhaustion, stress, and a mild heart attack. Treatable, the doctors said, with rest and care. Catherine arrived. At the hospital, before the doctors had finished their initial assessment, her usual composed demeanor cracking around the edges. She found Emma in the waiting room, clutching her mother's old quilted robe, the one she'd brought from home for Marcus. I should have seen it coming, Emma said, her voice small. He's been working 16-hour days, skipping meals, just like before Mom. This isn't like before, Catherine said firmly, sitting beside her. We caught it in time. He's going to be fine. but her hands trembled slightly as she pulled out her phone, already rearranging schedules and making contingency plans. The initiative's team gathered in the hospital lobby. Technicians, apprentices, office staff, all wanting news of their leader. Mrs. Rodriguez arrived with food for everyone, setting up an impromptu vigil in the waiting room. The community Marcus had helped build was rallying around him. He was worried about the Morrison House timeline, one of the senior technicians mentioned. Kept saying we had to finish before the next big freeze. "The timeline doesn't matter," Catherine snapped, then softened. Nothing matters except his recovery. But they all knew Marcus would disagree. Every delayed installation meant another family facing the cold, another home waiting for warmth. He'd taken each deadline personally, each family's comfort as his responsibility. When Marcus finally regained consciousness, his first words were about work. The Jensen installation. "They're expecting us tomorrow?" "Already handled," Catherine said, standing at his bedside. "Your team knows what to do. You trained them well." Emma sat on the other side of the bed, holding her father's hand. "Dad, you have to slow down. I can't lose you too." The words hung in the air, heavy with the memory of another hospital room, another vigil. Marcus looked at his daughter, seeing for the first time the fear behind her strength. She'd been putting on a brave face, just as she had during Sarah's illness, trying to be the strong one. "The initiative needs you," Catherine added softly, "but we need you healthy. The whole point was to build something bigger than one person, remember?" Through the hospital window, they could see the lights of Burlington, hundreds of homes staying. One thanks to the systems Marcus and his team had installed. The project had taken on a life of its own, growing beyond what any of them had initially imagined. "Your mother," Marcus said to Emma, his voice rough, "used to tell me I couldn't fix everything myself, that sometimes the bravest thing is letting others help." "Sarah was a wise woman," Catherine replied, her hand finding its way to Marcus's shoulder. The gesture was automatic, intimate in its casualness, and none of them commented on it. Outside the room, the team continued their vigil. They'd organized themselves into shifts, ensuring the initiative's work wouldn't fall behind while their leader recovered. Mrs. Rodriguez had somehow produced enough food to feed an army, and the waiting room had become a temporary headquarters for both emotional support and operational planning. "See," Emma said, managing a smile, "everything you built, it works even without you pushing yourself to exhaustion. Mom would be proud." Marcus looked between Emma and Catherine, seeing the worry in their eyes, the care in their actions. He thought of Sarah, of all her lectures about taking care of himself, of building something that could last. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, I hear you both." He squeezed Emma's hand, met Catherine's concerned gaze. "But someone needs to check the pressure valves at the community center installation." "Dad." "Marcus." Their simultaneous protests brought the first real smile to his face since waking. Outside his window, snow began to fall on a city that would stay warm without him, at least for a while. Maybe that was the greatest achievement of all. Recovery brought unexpected gifts. Forced to step back from day-to-day operations, Marcus watched in amazement as his team not only maintained but improved upon his systems. From his temporary office, a comfortable corner of the Morrison house's newly renovated sunroom, he discovered the joy of mentoring rather than doing everything himself. "Your blood pressure's much better," Emma reported after his latest checkup, 6 weeks into his recovery. "But you're still not allowed back on installation sites for at least another month." I know," Marcus smiled, watching through the window as his senior technicians guided a new apprentice through her first system diagnosis. "But look at them. They don't need me hovering anymore." The Morrison house had become a different kind of headquarters during his recovery. Catherine had quietly modified the renovation plans, adding a residential wing that somehow perfectly suited both a healing man and his occasional need to keep an eye on operations. She'd also started joining them for dinner most evenings, bringing updates on the initiative's expansion and, more importantly, a warmth that had nothing to do with heating systems. MIT sent the housing information, Emma mentioned casually, sorting through his medication schedule. They have these new, sustainable dorms with solar heating. Reminded me of your designs. Marcus nodded, remembering the college acceptance package that had arrived just before his heart attack. The scholarship papers were signed now, Emma's future secure. Catherine had tried to handle it privately, but Marcus had insisted on the money coming from his own salary. Some things a father needed to do himself. Speaking of designs, Catherine said, entering with a stack of papers, the State Advisory Board approved our expansion proposal. They want to implement the Wheeler model across Vermont. Wheeler model? Marcus raised an eyebrow. That's what they're calling it. Your approach to community-centered heating solutions. They're particularly interested in the apprenticeship program and the sliding-scale payment system. The pride in her voice made something warm bloom in Marcus's chest, and not from his medication. Over the weeks of his recovery, Catherine's professional demeanor had softened into something more personal, more tender. Emma had taken to making herself scarce in the evenings, claiming homework but wearing a knowing smile. The governor's office called again. Catherine continued, settling into what had become her usual chair near his. They want to present you with a community service award. I told them it would have to wait until you're stronger. They should be recognizing the whole team, Marcus protested. I've been stuck here while they've done all the real work. Dad, Emma interrupted. That's exactly why they want to recognize you. You built something that works even when you're not there. That's what Mom always said leadership should be. A comfortable silence fell, broken only by the distant sound of training exercises from the workshop area. Through the window, they could see Mrs. Rodriguez leading a community workshop on energy conservation. Her confidence grown from student to teacher. The MIT housing forms, Catherine said after a while, her voice carefully casual. They need a local emergency contact besides Marcus. Emma looked up sharply. Are you offering? If you'd be comfortable with that. I'll be checking on your father. Anyway, and Boston's just a short flight. Flight, Marcus interjected. Since when do you need to check on me? Catherine's cheeks colored slightly. I thought, that is, Emma's leaving for college soon. And you shouldn't be alone while you're recovering, and she straightened, finding her business voice again. It would be practical to combine oversight of the initiative with taking care of my dad, Emma supplied, helpfully grinning. Marcus reached for Catherine's hand, surprising them both. I think what Catherine's trying to say is that warm homes need warm hearts, Emma suggested, quoting her mother's old saying. The moment was interrupted by a burst of cheering from outside. One of the apprentices had successfully completed her first solo diagnosis, her fellow trainees celebrating her achievement. The sound embodied everything the initiative had become, a community of learning, support, and shared success. Yes, Catherine said softly, her fingers intertwining with Marcus's. Something like that. Emma gathered her things, making a show of checking her watch. I should go study. MIT's not going to wait forever. At the door, she paused. Mom would like this, you know. All of it. The initiative, the training program, and especially this. As Emma's footsteps faded, Marcus turned to Catherine. She's right. Sarah always said everything happens for a reason, even broken heaters in snowstorms. Catherine's smile held years of shared understanding. Even stubborn technicians who won't charge full price for midnight repairs. Outside, snow began to fall again, but inside the Morrison house, warmth had nothing to do with the state-of-the-art heating system. Sometimes, Marcus realized, the best repairs happened to hearts, not machines. Spring came to Burlington in a rush of melting snow and new beginnings. The Morrison house lawn, newly landscaped for Emma's graduation party, was dotted with chairs and tables, each one filled with people whose lives had been touched by the Wheeler initiative over the past months. Marcus stood at the grill, doctor-approved activities only, Catherine still insisted, watching Emma move through the crowd. His daughter had grown into someone Sarah would hardly recognize, yet would instantly understand. She wore her MIT acceptance pin alongside a small golden wrench charm that Marcus had given her that morning, a reminder of where they'd started. "She's explaining the new solar integration system to the governor," Catherine reported, appearing at his side with a fresh lemonade. "I think we're about to get state funding for the renewable energy expansion." "That's my girl," Marcus beamed. Though, technically, she was supposed to be enjoying her party, not working. "Says the man who's been sketching system improvements on his napkin for the last hour." Catherine plucked the napkin from his pocket, studying his drawings. "Though this modification to the pressure release valve is actually quite clever." The past few months had settled them into a comfortable rhythm. Catherine had gradually moved from the corporate side of the Morrison house to the residential wing, bringing with her a lifetime of books, a surprising collection of vintage thermostats, and a way of making every room feel more like home. Mrs. Rodriguez approached, leading a group of community members who'd been with them since the beginning. "Emma, come tell everyone about your scholarship program idea." Emma joined them, practically glowing with enthusiasm. "It's a partnership with MIT's engineering department," she explained. "They'll provide technical training here in Burlington during summers, and our apprentices can earn credits toward their degrees. Just like your mother's educational outreach programs." Mrs. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "Sarah always said education should build bridges between communities." The mention of Sarah no longer brought pain, just warm remembrance. Her presence was felt everywhere today, in the carefully arranged flowers she would have loved, in the community gathering she had always envisioned, in the way Emma had arranged for every guest to bring a donation for the local shelter instead of gifts. "Your father has an announcement too," Catherine prompted, giving Marcus a gentle nudge. "About the initiative's next phase." Marcus cleared his throat, suddenly nervous despite the familiar faces. "As most of you know, we've expanded to cover most of Vermont. But with Emma's MIT connection, we're looking at launching similar programs in Massachusetts. Sort of a Wheeler Warming Initiative, New England division." The cheers and applause made him blush, still uncomfortable with recognition. But Catherine squeezed his hand, and Emma beamed with pride. And he felt Sarah would have approved of how far they'd come from late-night emergency repairs. "There's one other announcement," Catherine added, her voice carrying a hint of something that made Emma's eyes widen. "About the Morrison house." Before she could continue, one of the apprentices rushed up, tablet in hand. "Mr. Wheeler, the new diagnostic software Emma designed just caught a potential failure at the community center. The system adjusted automatically, just like she said it would." Emma launched into a technical explanation that had the governor taking notes and the other technicians gathering round. Marcus watched her, seeing Sarah's intelligence and his own practical knowledge combined in their daughter, creating something entirely new. "She's going to revolutionize the whole industry," Catherine said softly, "though I suppose we should let her finish high school first." "Speaking of finishing things," Marcus turned to her. "That announcement about the house?" Catherine's professional demeanor slipped just slightly, revealing the warmth that had drawn them together over these months of recovery and renewal. "Well, since Emma's heading to college, and you're practically living here anyway during recovery, is this a business proposal or a personal one?" Marcus teased, echoing their first negotiation. "Both," Catherine smiled. "The best partnerships usually are." From across the lawn, Emma caught the exchange and gave them an enthusiastic thumbs up before returning to her technical discussion. The late afternoon sun caught the silver threads in Marcus's hair, the laugh lines around Catherine's eyes, marking not just time's passage, but love's presence. Around them, the community they'd built together celebrated not just Emma's graduation, but the warmth they'd found in each other. Mrs. Rodriguez was teaching new homeowners about energy efficiency. Apprentices were debating technical specifications with senior technicians. and through it all ran the thread of connection that had started with one late-night repair call. "You know what Sarah used to say about homes and hearts?" Marcus asked, drawing Catherine closer. "Tell me that the best ones keep getting warmer, no matter the season." Above them, the Morrison house stood proud against the spring sky, its windows reflecting the gathering below, its warmth reaching far beyond its walls to touch an entire community. 1 year later, the Morrison house buzzed with familiar activity as the Wheeler family prepared for another Vermont winter. Emma was home from MIT for the weekend, her freshman year experiences and innovative heating designs creating excited conversation among the apprentices who still trained in the workshop wing. Marcus stood in his old office, now a museum of sorts, where his original toolbox held a place of honor beside Catherine's father's business card and Sarah's framed sayings about warm homes and warm hearts. The wedding photo was the newest addition. Marcus and Catherine on the Morrison house steps last spring, Emma beaming between them, the entire community gathered around. "Dad," Emma's voice carried from the training center, "the new thermal efficiency calculations you wanted to see?" He found her surrounded by apprentices, demonstrating a simulation on technology that made his old gauge set look like ancient history. Her MIT professors had already incorporated her designs into their curriculum, calling it the Wheeler method, though Emma insisted on crediting her father's practical experience as the foundation. "Your mother would be so proud," Catherine, Azed, joining them. She'd kept her corporate offices in Burlington, but ran most operations from the Morrison house now, claiming the atmosphere improved her decision-making. "She'd be proud of all of us," Marcus replied, watching the next generation of technicians absorb Emma's lessons. "Though she'd probably say, 'I told you so' about a few things, like you two finally getting married." Emma grinned. She basically predicted that in her old journals. "I found the entry last week. Marcus needs someone who understands that fixing things isn't just about machinery." The initiative had grown beyond any of their initial expectations. The Wheeler model had been adopted by 3 other New England states, with pilot programs starting in the Midwest. But it was the local impact that meant the most. Every home in Burlington now had access to efficient heating, regardless of income. Mrs. Rodriguez had become their community outreach coordinator, her natural warmth and practical experience, making her perfect for helping new families understand their systems. She still insisted on feeding everyone who came through the training center, claiming good learning required good food. "The governor's office called again," Catherine mentioned casually. "They want to make the apprenticeship program a statewide standard. They're calling it the Sarah Wheeler Memorial Training Initiative." Marcus felt his throat tighten. She'd like that. Education and warming hearts, her 2 favorite things. Through the window, they could see new trucks arriving for the afternoon training session, each bearing the Wheeler Community Heating Solutions logo. But it was the smaller detail that caught Marcus's eye. A tiny golden wrench symbol, matched to the charm Emma wore, representing the perfect union of practical skill and innovative vision. "Oh, and MIT called," Emma added, trying to sound casual but barely containing her excitement. "They want me to present my hybrid solar thermal design at the International Engineering Conference. They said it could revolutionize cold climate heating efficiency." "Just don't forget where you learned the basics," Marcus teased, though his pride was evident. "In a broken-down truck, watching my dad fix the unfixable?" Emma hugged him. "Never." Catherine checked her watch. "The new family assistance program. Meeting starts in 10 minutes, shall we?" They walked together through the Morrison house, now a perfect blend of historic charm and modern efficiency. Every room held memories. Marcus's recovery, Catherine's gradual moving in, Emma's pre-college summer of training apprentices, the quiet evenings of building a new family while building a community. In the main conference room, families gathered to learn about the latest heating innovations and assistance programs. Marcus recognized faces from his old emergency call days. now transformed from clients in crisis to partners in community building. "You know what Mum's favorite saying was?" Emma asked as they prepared to start the meeting. "The one about how the best kind of warmth spreads from person to person." Marcus nodded, looking at his expanded family, Catherine reviewing presentation notes, Emma setting up her demonstrations, Mrs. Rodriguez arranging refreshments, apprentices eagerly preparing to share their knowledge. "I think we finally got it right," he said softly. "Not just fixing heaters, but warming hearts." Catherine finished, taking his hand. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall on Burlington. But nobody worried about the cold anymore. The Wheeler family had made sure of that, one home, one heart at a time.